Hello, this is Dr. Hanaa Assil, and this is on human circulatory system. This is for the IGCSE combined science, but it also applies to the IGCSE biology course. So let us take a look at the circulatory system. You should realize that the circulatory system pumps the blood to all parts of your body. So this is the system that transports substances around the body. So it is made up of what? It's made up of the heart and blood vessels. There are blood vessels that bring blood to the heart and blood vessels that take blood away from the heart to the rest of the body. So the first thing we need to know is the names of the parts of the heart. So if we say that blood is coming from anywhere in your body, blood coming from the legs, blood coming from the arms, blood coming from the brain, it will go to the heart. It will enter into the heart through the vena cava. Can you see that? So the vena cava is a vein, which is a type of blood vessel. It's a vein that is bringing blood to the heart. Now, of course, blood that is coming from the heart is blood that has a lot of carbon dioxide, and all the oxygen has been taken from the blood into the cells. So blood coming from the body, we call it deoxygenated blood because it is blood that does not have a lot of oxygen, but it has a lot of carbon dioxide produced from respiration of cells. So anyway, blood coming from the body enters the what we call the right side of the heart, and this enters through the vena cava. Now, the vena cava carries the blood from the body into the right atrium. Remember that the heart is made up of 4 chambers, 2 on the top called the atria, 2 on the bottom called ventricles. So the vena cava brings the blood into the right atrium. Now the walls of the atrium contract and push the blood through a valve. The valves in the heart are like one-way door. They force the blood to go in only one direction and prevent its backflow. So the tricuspid valve forces the blood to go from right atrium to right ventricle, but it prevents it from going backwards. So no blood can go from right ventricle to right atrium. So blood coming from the body enters through the vena cava into the right atrium. The walls of the atrium contract and push the blood through the tricuspid valve into the right ventricle. The right ventricle, its walls will contract, push the blood through what we call the semilunar valves. So these valves on top there are called semilunar valves into the pulmonary artery. Now, the pulmonary artery will carry all of this blood to the lungs. Remember that this is blood that does not have a lot of oxygen, it has a lot of carbon dioxide. Now, when it goes to the lungs, we need to exchange that. The carbon dioxide diffuses out of the blood, the oxygen goes into the blood, and then the blood returns back from the lungs through the pulmonary vein. Can you see where the pulmonary vein is? Blood coming from the lungs will go back to the heart through the pulmonary vein into the left atrium. The walls of the atrium contract, pushing the blood through the bicuspid valve, or sometimes we call it the mitral valve, into the left ventricle. The left ventricle, its walls contract, pushing the blood through the semilunar valve to the aorta that carries the blood to all the body. Remember, the blood that is coming from the lungs is full of oxygen, so we call it oxygenated blood. So remember that. The left atrium and left ventricle contain oxygenated blood, blood rich in oxygen. The right atrium and the right ventricle contain blood that is deoxygenated or has a lot of carbon dioxide. Okay, now if we look at the heart from outside, we have Can you see where the vena cava is? So this is where the blood enters through the vena cava, right atrium, right ventricle, pulmonary artery. Can you see what the pulmonary artery looks like from outside? Then we come back through pulmonary vein, left atrium, left ventricle, and then the aorta carries oxygenated blood to all parts of the body. And this includes the walls of the heart. Remember that the walls of the heart are made up of muscle cells. They also need glucose and oxygen to contract. What brings glucose and oxygen to the walls of the heart is the coronary artery. Can you see the coronary artery? So the coronary artery is a branch of the aorta bringing glucose and oxygen to the muscle cells in the walls of the heart. We can see that the blood went through the heart twice. This is called double circulation. So we said blood coming from the body that has a lot of carbon dioxide, so we call it deoxygenated. It enters the heart through the vena cava. Then the heart sends it through the pulmonary artery to the lungs, and then in the lungs, the carbon dioxide diffuses out of the blood. Oxygen diffuses into the blood, and the blood that comes back in the pulmonary veins is full of oxygen. So we call it oxygenated blood. Now, this goes into the heart and then out again through the aorta to the rest of the body. So the blood goes through the heart twice, once from body to heart to body, and once from heart to lungs to heart. We call that double circulation. Okay? Okay, so the coronary artery, we said the coronary artery brings blood to the walls of the heart so that it provides it with glucose and oxygen so that the muscles can contract and the heart can work properly, pumping the blood through the body. But if the coronary artery gets blocked, now what would block it? It would be blocked if there is a deposit of fats inside the walls of the artery. So deposits of fats inside the walls of the artery are called plaque. These will block the coronary artery either completely or partially. So less oxygen and glucose will reach the muscles of the heart. So they cannot do respiration, they cannot release energy, and they cannot contract to pump the blood through the body. This causes what we call coronary heart disease. So what causes coronary heart disease? You should remember someone who is smoking is more likely to have fats depositing inside his arteries, and this blocks the blood vessels and may cause heart disease. Or in the diet, if a person eats too much fat or eats too much salt, that could lead to heart attack. In addition, if the person is under a lot of stress, if he does not do a lot of exercise, or if there is someone in his parents or grandparents that already have heart disease, then he is genetically more likely to get heart disease. Of course, the chances of getting heart disease also increases with age and with gender. So a person that is older is more likely to have a heart disease. Males and females may differ according to their gender in their uh, possibility of having a heart disease. So to reduce the risk of having a heart disease, a person should avoid smoking, eat less fat, less salts, avoid stress, do regular exercise because the regular exercise stimulates the brain to speed up the heartbeat. Remember, when you do exercise, then the heart rate increases, and this helps to bring more blood to the muscles and carries more oxygen and glucose so the muscles can contract, do respiration, release energy, and contract properly. Okay, we have three types of blood vessels. Of course, blood vessels means tubes that carry your blood. So what are the blood vessels? They can either be artery or vein or capillary. If we look at their structure, what is the difference in their structure? You can see that an artery has a thick wall and a small lumen. Can you see what is the lumen? The lumen is the hole in the middle of the blood vessel through which the blood is flowing. So in arteries, the hole in the middle is smaller and the walls are thicker. But in veins, the lumen are wider, but the walls are thinner. Now, the blood capillaries have very, very thin walls, and these are found around the tissues to allow glucose and oxygen to diffuse from the blood to the tissues. So, the function of the arteries is it carries blood out of the heart. So, remember that the arteries are the tubes carrying blood out of the heart. So, the pulmonary artery and the aorta are arteries. Now, veins are carrying blood to the heart. Remember, we said what brings blood to the heart? The vena cava and the pulmonary vein. The capillaries are very thin walls, and we said these surround the tissues and they allow blood to diffuse to the tissues carrying oxygen and glucose and amino acids and things like that. So, what is the blood made up of? The blood is made up of a liquid called plasma. And floating in this liquid, we have several types of blood cells. We have the red blood cells, and you should know that the red blood cells are the ones that carry oxygen. We have white blood cells, and these are the ones that protect the body from disease, from harmful pathogens. Platelets are tiny little pieces of cells, and these help in blood clotting. Blood clotting is when you have a wound and the wound closes. So this is called blood clotting. So what are the parts of the blood? We said the liquid part is called plasma. Now the plasma is actually a yellow liquid. It is mostly water. And this is where you have dissolved glucose, amino acids, oxygen, carbon dioxide. So if he says which part of the blood transports glucose, it is the plasma, because the glucose will be dissolved in that liquid. Now, we also have red blood cells, and you should remember that red blood cells transport oxygen to all body cells. Now, how are they adapted to this function? You should remember how red blood cells transport oxygen. They have hemoglobin that attaches to oxygen. So in their cytoplasm, there is a substance called hemoglobin that attaches to oxygen. And when it goes to the cells, it releases the oxygen to the cells. They are also, the red blood cells are round biconcave disc. Can you see what it looks like? It looks like a donut. Round biconcave disc, and they have no nucleus. Remember that the red blood cells are the only cells in your body that have no nucleus. And this is to have more surface area for more gaseous exchange. So we're trying to have enough space to carry as much oxygen as possible. So this is what they look like. White blood cells are the ones that protect the body from harmful bacteria or viruses, but we have two types of white blood cells. We have white blood cells that have a large nucleus, and the way these cells protect the body is by producing antibodies. Antibodies are kind of molecules that will attach to the bacteria and help to destroy it. So lymphocytes, if we are looking at the picture, it's the one with the large nucleus. What do they do to protect you from diseases? They produce antibodies, which are substances that attach to the bacteria and help to destroy it. Now, the phagocytes have what we call the lobed nucleus. Can you see what the nucleus looks like? It's in pieces like this. So we call it lobed nucleus. And the way the phagocyte protects your body is by engulfing bacteria. You understand me of engulfing? Engulfing means the phagocyte surrounds the bacteria and takes it up into its cytoplasm as if it is eating it up or taking it in. So we say it engulfs the bacteria. Platelets are tiny little pieces of cells that help in blood clotting. We said if you have a wound that is bleeding, that means you cut one of your blood vessels, we need to close it. So how do we close it? We need to do blood clotting, and this requires platelets. Why is it important to do blood clotting? You should realize that you need to close your wound, because if you keep bleeding, then that would be fatal. The person will die. And we don't want any harmful microorganisms to enter into the body. Okay, so let's do some questions on the human circulatory system. So this first question says, oxygenated blood returns to the heart from the lungs in vessel X and leaves the heart to circulate around the body in vessel Y. So what are X and Y? If you remember, he's saying oxygenated blood returns to the heart from the lungs in vessel X. So what is X? Can you see where X is? From the lungs, it enters into the pulmonary vein. So X must be pulmonary vein. It leaves the heart to circulate around the body in vessel Y. Where is vessel Y? That is the aorta. Can you see that? The diagram shows a section through the heart, the ventricles contract, and blood is forced into the arteries. So, what is the state of valves 1 and 2? Remember, when the ventricles contract, the blood has to be forced into the arteries through valve 1, and that means valve 1, which is the semilunar valve, should be open. But valve 2 has to close because I don't want the blood to go back into the atrium. Remember, valve 2 is the bicuspid valve. It allows blood to go from atrium to ventricle and not backwards. So when the ventricle contracts, valve 2 closes to prevent the blood from going back into the atrium. The diagram shows some blood as it appears under the microscope. Which part carries glucose to the muscles? We said glucose is carried how to the muscles? Remember, we said it is carried dissolved in the plasma, the liquid part of the blood. So which part is the plasma? That is part C. Diagram shows the double circulation of blood around the human body. Which blood vessel contains blood at the highest pressure? Remember, if we're pumping blood to all the body, it has to go through the aorta, and that means that it is going under the highest pressure. So remember that the aorta is the one that has the highest pressure, because we need to pump the blood to all parts of the body. And that is why the walls of the left ventricle have to be thicker than that of the right ventricle, because it's pushing the blood to all the body. So which of these is the aorta? Of course, that is D. The photomicrograph shows a sample of human blood. What is the function of the cells marked X? What is X? Remember, X is the one that is biconcave disc. So these are the red blood cells, and these are the ones that transport oxygen. The diagram shows a section through the human heart. Which structures are joined by the tendons? Can you see what is tendons? Tendons are tiny elastic fibers that are holding the valves so that they don't go inside out, they don't turn into the atrium. So the tendons are tiny elastic fibers that are holding the valve to the wall of the ventricle so that they stay in place and act as a one-way door to prevent backflow of blood in the heart. Use the following words or phrases to complete the flow chart about the transport of oxygen to the tissues of the body. So he's starting with oxygen diffuses into the blood from the air in the alveoli. Now, oxygen is carried in the blood by what? By red blood cells. Remember, if we go to the lungs, what is happening in the lungs is the oxygen diffuses into the blood, so it is carried by the red blood cells, and the carbon dioxide diffuses out of the blood. Now, blood travels after that through the what to the heart. So from the lungs to the heart, it is going through pulmonary vein. Blood leaves the heart through the what after that? Remember that after that, the blood goes out of the heart through the aorta, and then blood enters the capillaries that surround the tissues, and this is where oxygen diffuses into the tissue cells. Okay, this figure shows a cross-sectional diagram of an artery. Describe one way in which the structure of the wall of the artery helps it to carry out its function. Remember that we said the wall of the artery is thick. Why do we need it to be thick? Actually, they are thick, elastic walls. This is to withstand the high blood pressure flowing through it. This figure is a diagram of the internal structure of the heart. State which of the vessels are arteries. Which of these are arteries? Do you remember? Which are arteries? The pulmonary artery is an artery. The aorta is an artery. So which of these are the ones in the diagram? Remember, B is the pulmonary artery, C is the aorta. State the name of the blood vessel with the highest pressure. Remember, we said the blood vessel with the highest pressure is the aorta. The aorta is the one with the highest pressure and is asking for the name. Explain why this blood vessel needs to have blood at high pressure. Of course, we said the blood in the aorta is at high pressure in order to be pumped to all body cells to carry oxygen and glucose to all body cells. This figure shows a longitudinal section of a diseased coronary artery. Remember that the coronary artery, if it is blocked, then it causes heart disease. Describe the function of the coronary artery. What was the function of the coronary artery? Remember, the coronary artery is the one that carries blood containing oxygen and glucose to the muscles in the walls of the heart. So what is X? We said X is something that deposits inside the walls of the coronary artery. We said this is fatty deposit, or we call it plaque. State two possible lifestyle choices that could increase the rate of formation of plaque in the coronary artery. Remember, what would cause fat to deposit inside your artery? Either smoking or lack of exercise or eating too much fat. Then this diagram of the internal structure of the heart, name the structure A and state its function. What is the name of A? Remember, A is a semilunar valve, and this forces the blood to flow in only one direction from the ventricle to the artery, in this case the aorta. Name blood vessel B. What is B? Remember, B is the one bringing blood from the body, so that is the vena cava. The blood in the left side of the heart contains more oxygen than the blood on the right side of the heart. Explain why there is this difference. Remember, on the left side of the heart, which is the left atrium and the left ventricle, where did it get its blood from? It got its blood from the lungs, and that is where oxygen diffused into the blood. So blood coming to the left atrium is oxygenated blood, or it has lots of oxygen. Describe how oxygen is transported by the blood. How is oxygen transported by the blood? Remember, it is attached to the hemoglobin in the red blood cells. A student is looking at a sample of blood using a microscope. Name the components. Can you see what is A, B, C, and D? What is A? A is something that has a lobed nucleus. This is one type of white blood cells. What is B? Can you see B? This is the biconcave disc, and this is the red blood cells. What is C? Tiny little pieces of cells. These are platelets. And what is D? The liquid in the blood. That is plasma. Then he says, suggest why the buildup of fat in the coronary artery causes the heart to become damaged. We said the coronary artery, if it is damaged, that leads to heart disease. Now, why is that? Remember that the fat deposits block the coronary artery. And the coronary artery is the one that is supposed to be bringing glucose and oxygen to the muscles and the walls of the heart. So if the coronary artery is blocked, then less glucose and oxygen reach the muscles and the walls of the heart. So the muscle cells cannot do respiration to release energy, so the muscles cannot contract and the heart cannot pump the blood to the body. Then this next question says, arteries and capillaries have different functions. Explain how arteries and capillaries are adapted to their function. Remember that the arteries are the ones that carry blood under high pressure. So they have thick muscular walls to withstand the high blood pressure. While capillaries are the ones that surround the tissues, they have very thin walls to allow diffusion of oxygen and glucose to the tissue. This figure shows an external view of the heart. On figure 4.1, use a label line and letter C to identify a coronary artery. So if we look at the diagram, where is a coronary artery? Any one of these branches on the sides of the heart, these are the coronary artery. Name the substance in red blood cells that carries oxygen. Of course, the red blood cells carry oxygen attached to hemoglobin. The heart rate increases during exercise, causing the blood to flow more quickly. Explain why the heart rate increases during exercise. Why do we want faster heart rate during exercise? Of course, this is to provide the muscle cells with more glucose and oxygen that are needed for respiration to release energy and to remove the carbon dioxide produced from cells when they do respiration. Okay, this figure shows a diagram of the internal structure of the heart and the blood vessels entering and leaving the heart. And he says, describe the function of valve Z. We said valve Z is the bicuspid valve. What is its function? To force the blood to flow in one direction from atrium to ventricle and prevent its backflow. So we don't want the blood to flow back from ventricle to atrium. The concentrations of oxygen gas and carbon dioxide gas in the blood on each side of the heart are measured. And he's saying, explain why the concentration of carbon dioxide in the blood in the right side of the heart is higher than in the left side. We said on the right side of the heart, we have blood that has more carbon dioxide, less oxygen. This is, of course, because the blood is coming from the body. The carbon dioxide formed from respiration in the body cells diffused into the blood that is going to the heart. Describe what causes oxygen concentration in the blood to be higher in the left side of the heart. Why is it that the left side of the heart has more oxygen? We said before that the oxygen diffused into the blood when it was in the lungs. And then this blood went to the left side of the heart. Of course, it entered through the pulmonary vein. State what is meant by coronary heart disease. What was meant by coronary heart disease? This is the blockage of the coronary artery, and this decreases blood flow to the muscles of the heart. Describe one lifestyle choice a person can make to reduce the chance of developing coronary heart disease. If we don't want coronary heart disease, what can we do? Regular exercise, or avoid stress, or eat less fat. This diagram shows some body cells surrounded by capillaries. Remember that we said the capillaries surround the body cells. Circle one substance in the list that leaves the capillaries to enter the body cells. So something that goes from the blood to the cells. Of course, from the blood to the cells, that would be glucose. The other one would be oxygen, for example. Use words or phrases from the list to complete the following sentences about oxygen in the blood. So he's saying oxygen is carried in the blood by the what molecules? We said what attaches to oxygen? Hemoglobin molecules, which are contained in the hemoglobin molecules are on what? Red blood cells. And then the oxygen moves out of the capillary by the process of, remember, diffusion. Describe how the structure of capillaries enables some substances to pass through their walls. We said, why do substances diffuse through the walls of the capillaries? Because they have thin walls. Okay, that's the end of this chapter. I hope you understood what we were saying, and we meet in the next video. Thank you for listening.